It's race week, Ohio, man. We got a bunch of people.
Ohio, Oregon 70.3. We got Outlaw 140.6 over in the UK. And you got Lake Placid this weekend. It is a busy, busy weekend. Hope you had an awesome weekend yourself. It's July 19th, 2021, and welcome aboard. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, and we are episode 496.
What? Why do you always look at me when you say that? We just said it.
I just need further affirmation.
That's sort of like a ceremonial. Yep, it is.
It's just I need the confidence boost, right?
Doesn't really matter what episode it is.
It's kind of like when Canadians always answer their own questions with or right. Like I used to work with a bunch of Canadians when I lived in Hilton Head. They came down there and worked in the summer. They're like, yeah, don't you want to go to this restaurant tonight, right? I'm like, well, you just told me. Like, what do you mean? Yeah. Like, yeah, right? Like, you just told me we're going. Like, why are you asking me these questions right now? I just need a little bit of affirmation. What's wrong with a little bit of affirmation, especially on a Monday where it is rainy.
Everybody needs affirmation.
It is gross. It is nasty. But, hey, we need the rain because it saves me on the water bill, which we aren't saving right now currently. Thankfully, our man, Alex Quarles, came in clutch, and we got our new part in for the endless pool here at the Hub in Chattanooga, and that is filling up as we speak. So for some reason, we have to jump off the podcast and go tend to it. It means something went wrong, but it'll probably be still filling up by the time we podcast on Thursday at the rate it's going right now. But we're getting that rocking and rolling. Again, hope you had awesome weekends. First time tuning in, welcome. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and podcasts in general, so we appreciate your time. We cover it all. We cover swim, bike, and run specific training. We cover race recaps. We do race previews. Sometimes we'll hop into our closed group, which is on Facebook. You can search Crushing Iron Group, be a part of that conversation. Sometimes we'll go in there and let the community in there drive the topic of the day. We'll do Q&As and try to get to as many of those questions as we can. Sometimes we'll do have the occasional guest. One of our favorite guests, Ken Hammond, has another race coming up. He just had Muscle Man. Hopefully we get to see him at Ohio. And hopefully I'll make sure we find him. We'll snag him. He's an awesome guy, race director. So if you're there doing Ohio this weekend, we'll be up there. Mike has said he is good to go with unlimited selfies. So if you find him, make sure you grab him. And if you see Ken Hammond, who's your race director, make sure you thank him. I think race directing is probably one of the most thankless jobs on the planet because you probably only get all the emails and the Facebook comments that just totally barrage you with total negativity. You only hear about things when things go wrong. You don't really hear about when things go really, really, really right. And so make sure you reach out to them and thank him for getting this race going because it was a hard year last year for all race directors. So find him. But as far as the podcast goes, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, just kind of sit back and relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life and in training. We've both been doing this for a long time, coaching and racing and living, obviously. We have no sponsors. We have no ads, but we have one agenda, and that's to hopefully help you stay happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah. If you see me up in Ohio, come on over, take a selfie. If you're interested in coaching, we can have a little talk. Like one-on-one, it'd be great to meet you.
Yeah, unless you and I rode together, and then you need to make things speedy. You know how I am. When I'm up there, I need to get back.
Yeah. But I'm not. I'm just kind of up there quasi-socially.
What is quasi-socially?
Well, I'm running the back half.
You're participating in the relay. We have a lot of athletes racing. It is. It's a busy weekend. Just for which is going to be like for the rest of the year. I am on last week's podcast.
Podcast.
That's right. On last week's Crushing Clash podcast. Hey, we forgot to tell you guys that if you didn't listen to last week, we're changing the name.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're changing our name.
Clash Iron Podcast.
No. We're changing our whole name to Thunder Triathlon.
Thunder Triathlon Podcast.
C26 is leaving. It's going to be Thunder.
And that Triathlon. That's in reference to Challenge changing their North American races to Clash. Which is like one of the greatest marketing fails ever. Anyway, I digress.
I ordered you a hat.
In the letter, you did? Like Days of Thunder? Like old school?
No, just with their logo.
Oh, God. Anyway, the one Hayden did. And speaking of, he's not on Facebook, thank God. He's not on Instagram. He's too young and hopefully never will be. He turns 5 tomorrow. We had an awesome weekend with him. I want to share a quick story before I go into the quote-unquote tri battle that was Lionel Sanders and Jan Frodeno this past weekend. We had Hayden's birthday party last weekend, went to Top Golf. He's got a swing on him.
Does he?
Yeah, he does. And he had a great time. The weekend was great because he had the Tour de France, you had F1 racing, and I've talked about his and mine love of F1 racing now, and they had a super sprint on Saturday. Unfortunately, things with Hayden have kind of gone poorly. He was a Sergio Perez fan, and recently I guess he's become a Max Verstappen fan, which is the person who I dislike the most. And the reason, which is a very valid reason, is because he likes his hair. He thinks he has really good hair. And he said, I like Max Verstappen because he has hair. So before the race yesterday, he said, I said, who are you going to cheer for? And he said, I'm cheering for Max Verstappen. I said, all right, well, I'm going to cheer for Lewis Hamilton. And because Max Verstappen was on pole, he was first, Lewis was second. On the first lap, Lewis gave a little nudge to Max Verstappen. He ended up going off the course and wrecking, so he was done. Hayden was, when I say he was upset, he threw his plastic bowl that he had just finished with his Fig Newtons in across the room. he was like genuinely upset.
Wow.
And had like a small little meltdown because he was upset he wasn't going to win the race. And I was like, you have the makings of a great college football fan, my friend. we will have.
But man, if he's going on that F1 road, I don't know if he's going to be a college football fan.
Sure he will.
Man.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of one or the other.
F1 is a team sport. But we had an awesome weekend. He turns 5 tomorrow, and it feels like he's going on 20. But on the last week's podcast on Friday, at the very, very end, because Elise Gallegos, one of our buddies, suggests I talk about the Tri Battle, which was and I said I wasn't going to watch it because I really was pretty uninterested until she texted me at like 4:30 and was like, hey, just as a heads up, this was like the gap in the swim. I was like, let me tune in and just see what's going on here, because basically, and here's
one-on-one. I didn't.
So it's one-on-one, and that's the problem, right? Is like it's kind of like the PTO, the pro triathlete organization, where I think is like one big gigantic flop, and what they're trying to actually accomplish, because they're trying to kind of put a dent in what Ironman does and get professional athletes paid more, which I agree they should get paid more. But basically what happened is Jan Frodeno, basically himself and his manager Felix and a couple of the big sponsors, Swift, Canyon, Hoka, basically put on like a one-on-one race, which I think sounds interesting on the surface of it. But he invited Lionel Sanders, and in my opinion, he invited Lionel because he thought Lionel could maybe push him a little bit on the bike, but also, if we're being totally honest, Lionel has a gigantic fan base, right? His YouTube has like more followers and subscribers than any other triathlete, pro triathlete, besides maybe, like Triathlon Terran, or Iron Cowboy. And so I think that's why he got the invite. They labeled it a tri battle. I think the setup is interesting if you invite someone that's going to maybe push you, but the gap ended up being like 16 minutes. Like he beat him by 16 minutes. There was never any head-to-head, shoulder-to-shoulder battle. And I don't know that you can consider or call something a battle if it was a blowout. He beat him by about 4 or 5 minutes on the swim. He beat him by about 4 or 5 minutes on the bike. And he beat him by about 4 or 5 minutes on the run. It really wasn't that close.
It was a full?
It was a full. Okay. Having said that, Jan is obviously, I think, one of the greatest, if not the greatest triathlete of all time. Olympian gold medalist, 70.3 champion, Kona, multiple Kona champion. He is the best for a reason, but I think it'd be really cool if they invited like 4 or 5 people at the same time, like some guys that could swim the same and bike around the same, like to make it interesting. Like the most exciting race I have watched in the last 2 or 3, well, obviously last year doesn't count, but the last like 3 or 4 years was St. George 70.3, watching Sam Long and Lionel be like shoulder to shoulder for like a 5K going down the stretch. That to me was entertaining, right? Because it was unscripted. This was very, very scripted. To me, it came off as kind of like the Jan Frodeno show. He did his whole interview and was like shaking hands and kissing babies while like Lionel was still on course trying to finish his run. It just wasn't that, it wasn't a battle. It was really just showing how incredible Jan is of an athlete. I thought it was a good feather in the cap for Lionel to actually have finished an Ironman recently. But hopefully that bodes well for him the rest he does this year. But how exciting can you be watching 2 guys work out for 7.5 hours? Yes, they were racing. Jan, it was cool to watch Jan break like quote unquote the world record, even though there kind of isn't one in Ironman triathlon because courses aren't certified. But the commentary was boring. Watching the race itself was incredibly boring. I think there's probably a win there somewhere if you can find multiple guys or multiple girls to go out there and do it. Like I would love to see like a Lucy Charles, Danielle Reef, those kind of caliber women like go at it head to head, And then maybe obviously you're doing on the men's side, like throw like 3 or 4 in there, like make it like really interesting and not just having like 2 guys. Cause the gap was just so big. There was Lionel was never getting closer. It was just boring. It just, and like the Collins Cup, like there's just a lot of people are trying to make triathlon more mainstream for the pros, which I think is a good thing. But at the end of the day, Ironman and triathlon is driven by age groupers because we're the ones that pay the bills. I thought it was interesting. I think the hardest, besides like the 2 things I took away from it, was one, how insanely hard it must be to race by yourself for 7 hours and 27 minutes, which is what Jan did, alone. Like nobody to chase, right? Barely any fans, having to hold your limit when he hasn't raced a full in 2 years. How kind of mentally taxing that has to be to kind of hold form when you're not being pushed. And then the other part was that he commented after the race that he had forgotten how to pace an Ironman. Then he kind of paced the bike like a 70.3. His bike split was like 355, which is just unreal. So he said after the race, he said he kind of paid the price for the bikes because he didn't race long distance. So I thought the reminder was good. But yeah, generally I thought it was incredibly boring to watch. I'm sure some people loved it. And then Lionel Sanders again has like, the most intense, large, dramatic fan base that there is. But we'll see.
All right. So here's what I'm thinking. You said 3 or 4 other. Why not take the top 20 finishers at Kona in men and women and put on a clash like a month or 2 later and get a course that's like 6-loop bike and like maybe a 6-loop run or something that's like a challenging, interesting, cool course that people could kind of circle around and see it and do a full Ironman with loops. And you only have 40 people, so you could spread it out and, make some hills in there. Do like a nice, challenging course and really promote the crap out of it and cover it like for the whole thing or 2 days beforehand and just go all in. Like do some kind of thing.
I think that's what the PTO was trying to do with Challenge, was put like some of the best pros up. But the thing is that all professionals have, and this is the same with age groupers, all professionals have a different focus on what to them is important. Like, Ann Hogg, Jan Frodeno, the 2 best, if not the best athletes on the planet, like they're not giant YouTubers. Like that's not their thing. They just like to win. They like to be champions. Like, and now it's becoming more of like we live in a Jake Paul world. Okay. And that's what it's kind of felt like. It kind of felt like Floyd Mayweather fighting Jake Paul, was like, who has the most YouTube following versus one of the greatest of all time in their respective sports. It's not so much about the competition. Some of these is about how many viewers we can get, how many YouTube subscribers that we can views online. It's what sells. And I think that's the hard part. And it's also the hard part with getting age groupers to get involved. Because for me personally, I could care less what I don't follow a single triathlete, period, on Facebook, like a professional on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram, not on the other stuff. I don't subscribe to any YouTube channel, not even ours. So I think you have the triathlete population in that category, and then you have the other end, which they follow every single, they follow the PTO, the professional triathlete organization. They follow the Collins Cup. They follow Ironman. They follow as many, of the top level Ironman athletes that they can that choose to promote themselves on Instagram or talk, because they have to do that for their sponsors. But that's where the huge disconnect is. And that's why it'll be almost, I think, impossible for triathlon to really, really go mainstream, because the best of the best of the best don't give a shit about Instagram and YouTube followers and stuff like that. They care more about focusing on what's important to them, which is winning. And to me, when I want to go watch a race, I could care less who has the biggest YouTube following or has the biggest, Instagram, followers. I care about seeing the best athletes on the planet go head to head, like watching the tactics, like watching the racing. I like to watch it unfold, which is why I like watching Kona, because it's usually it's the best long course athletes on the planet that day. It's why I like watching the Olympics, why I like watch ITU racing, because it's about tactics, it's about racing, it's about who's got the best fitness. It's not about showmanship. And like kind of you mentioned, like with golf last week, about the U.S. Open or the Masters, somebody like giving prize money or something, like people with the most likes or YouTube. Feel like that's where we're going with stuff. And while that generates fan base reactions, it doesn't generate long-time participation in the sport. Right? And that's why I have a huge disconnect with how things go with a lot of these. I find it irrelevant, which is sad, because I think it'd be great if we had pro triathletes were more popular, but we don't, this isn't a very fun sport to watch. I mean, let's be honest about it. It's just not a very fun sport to watch, especially in long distance racing. Now, if you want to, get the ITU season pass, which I'd highly recommend, that's fun to watch. The races are over in like an hour and 50 minutes or 2 hours. It's bang, 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 open water swims, mass starts. They're riding in a group. There's breakaways. They're running out all like that. To me, that's fun to watch. That's why that sport's growing immensely. You want to televise an 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour endurance event where they really only put the camera on like 3 people and just watch them exercise? No, I'm uninterested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of agree, but that's sort of us in a way. I think a lot of people would be interested. If they came into, say, a city like Chattanooga, and we could host a pre-party, and
it's a pre-party,
and you pick maybe it's the top 10 age groupers at Kona too, and you're just kind of really make it a clash of like, hey, okay, so you could kind of piggyback on Ironman's success, and then just sort of like, you have to qualify for this race by getting top 10 at Kona or something like that. And you bring about, I don't know, whatever, 200 people in, and you just make a really cool course that the run goes through downtown, or something like that. And people are out and around. I mean, a supportive city, I think, would help. To me, there's something somewhere in there to kind of,
if we were to put on a race and you said, we're going to have the Clash Thunder Invitational here in Chattanooga, sponsored by formerly C26 Triathlon Crushing Iron Podcast, now Thunder, I would suggest an invitational where you had a team of 3 or a team of 6, and you had to show up, but drafting was legal. It was very much like the Tour de France. Like you can basically have your team of 3 athletes or your team of 6 athletes. You got to, and the fastest person the person who comes across the finish line first wins, right? It doesn't have to be your whole team. It has to be just one person. So you'd pick your team, your other 2 people, your other 5 people on your team based on who the best swimmers, but you also can take into account like drafting behind them for 4 or 5 minutes. Who's going to draft behind who on the bike? Obviously you want your best runner to swim 6th or 3rd or 6th on the swim, third or 6th on the bike, and save themselves. And even honestly, draft a little bit behind one of the best runners for the first half marathon and save a little bit of energy, and then blow their gasket for the last half marathon. Like, I would be interested to watch that, because I think it would require a lot of dynamic strategy and planning to watch the groups, because it's a lot like watching. That's why I'm so intrigued by watching the Tour de France. I think people really, and why I enjoy watching it, and I think people grossly underestimate how much of a team sport professional cycling is. It is a 100% team sport. Like, there are literally people that they hire there just to never win, but to do work for the guy who's going to win. Like, they will get to the front of the peloton and they will absolutely bury themselves going up a gigantic mountain just to save the guy 2 riders behind them energy. And then they'll pop off the back and then they basically suffer alone for 20, 30 minutes. They get to the top and the same guy's in front, buries himself to give one guy the chance to win. And that's why I think it's such a fun thing to watch in a great team sport. But I think triathlon could do that in terms of how you did it that way. I think that'd be fun to watch, but whatever. It's an individual sport for a reason. It's endurance sport fins. They're all going to be long. They're probably never going to be very interesting in terms of viewership. But hey, anytime you're willing to try something new, I thought, formerly known as Challenge Daytona did something new when they had what they had going last year. I think this is an interesting concept that Jan put together. I think it's fascinating just how much power he has to put together a race like this in a town of Germany where the whole entire course was closed. It was a great production that he put on, basically something that the PTO has been trying to put on. He was like, yeah, pretty much, I'm like kind of the guy. I can kind of do what I want to. And he has, sponsors like Mercedes. And he was like, so I'm just going to get a little town, get this whole course, map it out, and we'll just do it. I think the concept is cool. I think there's a lot that we can get done with it, but whatever. We're age groupers. We don't know that much. No one's going to ask our opinion. So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging because they're trying to do that Tiger and Phil Mickelson thing or whatever. And it's like nobody cares about, triathlon really in the big picture. So, I mean, why not do we got to get off this, but
yeah, we do.
Top 20 pros, men and women, top 4 are captains. You pick 5 people, and then your overall team time.
Yeah, I mean,
so that way people can't quit or they have to kind of suck it up. And then towards the end, you'd be like, oh.
It just feels, when you do something like this, it just feels too scripted. And to me, I don't like watching things that are scripted. I didn't watch like the Tiger and Phil thing. I wouldn't watch a one-on-one basketball game, between, 2 of the top players I'm playing. Like I'm not interested in that. I like to see like the heat of competition, because what makes competition so great is that it's unpredictable, right? Mm-hmm. And the more people you put into the mix, the more unpredictable it comes. And that's why I was somewhat uninterested, but also at the same time fascinated by the breaking 2 attempt at Nike, because it was like so. It was all down to making things precise to where it could go as perfectly as possible. Same thing was done with this race. They had like a ramp, a U-turn ramp, so they wouldn't have to like slow down on turns and stuff. It was like basically it was done to like make sure that Jan broke the world record. But same thing for the Nike 2 thing, Nike Sub 2. I was uninterested just because I think it's an incredible human feat. They're both incredible human feats, and I do think it's a good reminder of just how limitless the human body is. I get, and I'm sure I'm old and I'm grumpy and I'm that guy, but when I'm uninterested when things are scripted to go perfectly, because that's not life, right? That's fantasy land. It's yes, I think it's a great thing to see what the body is capable of, but I'd rather watch and participate in an event where things are going to be hard. Like they're not scripted. Like that's my problem. Nothing in life is scripted. We all think that we can do. We all have an opportunity each and every day to do what we want to do with life, but none of it can be scripted. We can have a script. We can have a goal. We can have an agenda. We can have expectations. We can have these races we want to do for the year. But guess what? Life is unpredictable. Life takes control. But that's what makes it, I think, fun, exciting, and rewarding all at the same time, because that's what an Ironman is. None of it is scripted. You can script everything to you want. You can have a plan A, but for the most part, a lot of people have to deviate from plan A like after mile 20 of the bike, or they have to go to plan B, or they have to go to plan C, or they wonder why they didn't have a plan D, or they get a flat tire, or it's going to rain. Like that's what makes endurance sports, I think, so great, is because you have to be able to think on the fly, but it's also why it makes it that much more rewarding, and we've covered this before. When you ask athletes like what some of their favorite races ever that they ever participated in, or the most memorable, they rarely ever go back to the one that it was perfect. My lead up to the race was perfect. My race is perfect. The weather was beautiful. They go back to Ironman Louisville when it was insanely hot, or Ironman Louisville was insanely cold, or a Wisconsin race that really was the swim was really tough. They go back to event Ironman Chattanooga, was incredibly hot, old school Lake Tahoe, they go back to the ones that were memorable, the ones that were tough. And I think that's what, again, gravitates us towards endurance sports. And while it's great to watch these athletes that, to me, it's like watching someone else's alternate reality. I'm never going to be as fit and as fast as you ever, because triathlon's not my job. Okay. And I'm also probably never going to participate in a closed course, perfect environment. So I totally unrelate to all of that, which is probably why I was a little bit disinterested. But again, I think that for us, like endurance sports, I think in a way, even though not everybody would admit it, a lot of us are also kind of attracted to I wonder what's going to happen kind of thing. And I think that's fun and exciting, at least for me.
Yeah,
the everyday age grouper.
I get what you're saying there. I don't like that whole 2 minute or break 2 hours thing. I had that was I don't know. But what I think I think the most interesting thing about Ironman is when you go there, and a lot of times as a spectator I do it, or if I'm racing, whatever. When I get down to the the
Expo,
Ironman Expo, or whatever, Village or whatever they call it, and you start seeing the team shirts of the families and these, people that would never, ever, ever go be interested in watching Ironman. All of a sudden you got, the big guy with a big beer belly and he's wearing a shirt, Team Jan or whatever. And it's just pink shirts or whatever. And like what you just said at the end there is that's the unexpected. So now these people are vested. I don't think there's really any other races out there, maybe besides big marathons where the family members really get vested in what's going on. And it's such a big accomplishment, and the support around it with the family and friends and things like that. And you have these groups of like 8 to 10 people sometimes wearing these shirts, and they make these big signs and these head cutouts and all these kind of things. It's like they don't know, it's their first time. And I think so all around, it's sort of the first timers that kind of make the sport. I think it's sort of that unique enthusiasm that you had. And I remember, you know, you were up at my first one, and my mom and my dad and like all these people that were friends of mine came, and they were just like, "You're doing what?
That's awesome.
It's crazy." And you know, and they all had shirts on, and I think that's what makes Ironman, to be honest. And it's just sort of this this voluntary, let's get behind this whole thing and make it our own event. So there's little events within the event that make it exciting. And it's always like, then you start talking to them, how are they doing? You know, and then you become friends or whatever, and you're tracking their person, and their person is doing their first Ironman or something like that. And it's just like a crazy, intriguing drama that unfolds over, you know, the course of a day. And it's got nothing to do with the pro, other than, you know, it's cool to see pro. I mean, but that's why I think pros need to be racing at most races too, because it is cool to see them out, and you're like, because it's the people that are like, you know, the big guy rooting for Jen going, did you see that one guy? He was really flying down. I can't believe. So it creates this chasm between, it's like, wow, this is amazing that our person took 16 and a half hours and this person was done in 8. It's like, whoa, what is that? It's the contrast of that is just absolutely beautiful. And I think it's what really makes the sport.
Well, you nailed it. And that is why Ironman thinks that they really don't need professionals to make the sport grow, right? Because in my opinion, most people are driven into the sport by emotion, right? They are a
life changer.
They're a life changer. Exactly. They are, because listen, like, again, Ironman and all race management companies are a business. Okay. They're not a sport. They're a business. You pay them to show up and race. Like, sometimes we laugh about it. We're like, okay, we're paying how much money to go do what? Like, you're paying someone to do that. What you said about the families that wear like the matching shirts, and they have like, you know, they're holding up like, you know, a poster, they're cheering. Like, people go to races and get motivated because they feel moved. They have emotion. They have things that go through their mind mentally and emotionally that trigger them to a place where I can do that. No one, I wouldn't say no one. Very, very few people have probably watched the person break the tape at the finish line and been like, you know what? I can do that. You know, like, I can go from couch to champion in you know, a year or two. It's the back of the packers. It's the middle of the packers. It's a person who looks like your brother or looks like yourself. You're like, if they can do it, I can do it. You know, and like, it's where you get to the point to where you start to see yourself differently because you see other people that look like you or that sound like you or that, you know, they may, you know, be the same shape as you or whatever it is. Like, you're like, if they can do it, I can do it. And you kind of have to get the self-belief. Same thing goes for like the Kona broadcast. The Kona broadcast isn't about the professionals. The Kona broadcast is a partnership between NBC and Ironman to get more people in the sport, which is why they focus on the special interest stories. For the most part, it's I first got into the sport because I watched Kona on NBC. Okay, so you watch the special interest stories that are very moving. You know, people cry, and then I'd argue more people will probably get into the sport of triathlon because of Chris Nikic. I think that's how you say his last name. The guy with Down syndrome that finished Ironman Florida last year and recently won at SP. Well, more people will get into the sport because of him than a professional athlete, and it's because you get something hits you in your soul and in your heart that thinks. Yes, you'll have bucket listers who see it and think, all right, I want to do this because I want to cross it on my list, and that's fine. But the people who get into the sport and probably stick around are the ones that are drug into this sport because they need something, right? And when you need something, what do? You go buy it. You're a consumer. You go look for something that's going to help you fix a problem. What we have done, what many of us have done, myself included, I got in the sport to lose weight. Okay, I got into the triathlon to lose weight a long, long time ago. And I'm still around. Like that, I didn't get in the sport to be a champion. I didn't get in the sport to be a podcast host. I didn't get in the sport to be a coach. I didn't get in the sport to win titles. I got in the sport because I wanted to take my life back. And I used triathlon as a vessel to lose weight. I ended up loving it, obviously, and I'm still sticking around. But that's why people get into the sport. Most people, I'd argue 85, 90% of people get in the sport because they are looking for something. And most people on this planet aren't looking to be that like 0.0001% of the planet who's going to finish an Ironman in, you know, under 7.5 hours. You know, world record. Like that's not what moves. It's the everyday person that's going. That's why I believe relatable is what sells, right? Relatable is what makes you seem obviously like you're not alone. That person's going through it. This person's going through it. If they can make it happen, I can make it happen. That's why our sport can be so welcoming when you open it up and understand that anybody can participate no matter what you're going through. And that's why it's great to see success stories from athletes that don't have the easiest life, that aren't, you know, don't have everything catered to them, and they're not professionals, but they're making it work. And that's where I know for myself included, that's when I get most inspired, is when I see people that are like me going through what I'm going through, being successful, not the top end of the top end of the top end that, you know, that's their job. They can train 25, 30 hours a week. They've been in the sport for 30 years. Like, to me, I can't relate to any of that. I don't get it. I like to get it. And that's why I think, you know, age groupers refer age groupers, and that's what drives the boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I got in it for the same kind of reason. I was getting out of shape and I was really worried about that. And I was like, it's not really what got me into Ironman. What got me into Ironman was actually watching one. And then I think what happened to me was my competitive switch flipped back on. It was sort of like college sports is back, you know, and you can kind of, you know, it would be sort of like being a college basketball player or a college whatever. And you know what I mean? You can't just play in the NBA. And this sort of feels like the NBA or the NFL of endurance sports, because you go to see a race. I was at Louisville that first time watching. I had no idea, and I was just kind of a year away from actually doing mine. I wasn't even entertaining it that hard yet. And I saw it, and I was like, oh, boy, I got to do this, man. There's like thousands of people cheering you across the finish line, and there's people everywhere, and it's like a big deal, right? You know, it kind of felt like, oh, I miss the crowds. I miss the energy of the competitive sports. And, you know, and as we've always talked about, the competition is usually within yourself. I mean, you really have, that's the healthy way to approach this. But, you know, in my mind, my competition is sort of against these guys in my age group that I don't know all over the country. And I want to, you know, just kind of, it just sort of sticks in my head a little bit. Like, I don't know these guys at all, who's going to show up or whatever, but I want to go out and beat them. And, you know, it's reasonably possible. And, you know, that's sort of that ex-athlete thing is a big deal too, because I think there's a lot of people that obviously play high school and pro sport or college sports, and they kind of like, I've always wondered about it. In fact, I've always wanted to make a documentary about that in some way in my head, is that like, what happens when, you know, some kid's playing for University of Alabama and he finishes his last game and he's been on Alabama and they played on the national stage and won a national title in front of, and everybody wants to talk to him. And then, like, you know, the next year, nobody really cares about him, you know, like how that affects your psyche. So that's why I think a lot of athletes at some point kind of look at Ironman and go, you know, I can do that maybe. Okay. That might bring back a little something that's just still gnawing at you. You know, it's hard to let go of that glory day on a lot of levels.
Listen, it's always good for you to be your driving force, right? For you to be able to light your own fire. But there is nothing wrong with having a can of gasoline or a couple pokers on the shelf, right? Mm-hmm. You know, to have, like, you know, other things in your life. Because listen, if that's your only driver, then it's going to collapse, because you're going to run out. You're going to run out of gasoline. You're going to run out of, you know, things to poke the fire with, and
sure,
you're going to run out of wood to put on it. You know, you got to be the one that's, for the most part, going to carry your own flame. And that's like when you see athletes who burn out really quickly, is they're doing it to prove somebody else wrong. You know, and this person they're trying to prove wrong probably doesn't even give a shit. They don't even know if they're even participating in triathlon. You know, it's like they say about resentment. It's like, you know, drinking something poisonous and expecting the other person to die. So you can't do something that's not sustainable that's not just for you, because it's going to wither away and it's just going to go. It's going to go. It's not sustainable. Nor is it healthy, right? To focus on proving someone else wrong, or to, you know, I want to beat so-and-so. Like, meanwhile, so-and-so living their life probably the fullest, happiest can be. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know you were doing triathlon. And then you're like, wait a minute, this didn't turn out.
Pisses me off even more.
It's exactly right.
I'm going to get him. I'm going to show
you. But it's just like, because, I mean, honestly, like, you do it for you, right? And you should do it for you, because when you finish the race, like, if you can't finish an event no matter what distance it is, or even like you're training and think, God, that felt good for me. If you got to hang your hat on who did you beat, or did you beat your last time, or did you, is it, what did so-and-so do today? Like if you're in that kind of mix, then good luck to you, because you're not going to be in the sport very long, because you're going to burn out. And frankly, you're just not going to get much from it. The competition is healthy. Obviously, in all aspects of life, competition is a good thing, right? It brings the most out of us, and that's what makes us, I referenced that a couple weeks or 2 weeks ago when Djokovic won Wimbledon for the 20th time. He was like, he thanked Nadal and Federer because he's now tied with them for 20 across the board. And he was like, I wouldn't be near as good as I am now if it wasn't for those two guys, because I knew I had to raise my level even more than I ever thought I could to even just compete. So being competitive and having that is very, very, very good. But ultimately, it's about, what are you choosing to be competitive about? Are you choosing to, be competitive with yourself? And even then, like, are you competing against a former time, right? If the next time you go race is about, I got to beat my old time. Or is it about, I want to be competitive, relatively speaking, against who I am right now with the training that I've done, which, with life is provided. Like, and we go through that all the time as athletes and as coaches. We hear that a lot from the people we work with, I looked back to 2019 and I was a little bit this, a little bit that. I'm like, dude, are you really right now comparing a race course where you're a totally different person than you were 2 years ago in a lot of different respects? And then also, of course, that could have been different and also with different, like, is that how we are choosing to compare ourselves? And if we get better, or are we better, or where are we within the sport? That's why I think being competitive has to come from just intrinsically feeling and knowing that you did the best you could in training. And now the competitive part is, what can I do during this race to get the most out of what I did do? Not what I didn't do, right? Not harp on what I didn't do. Or, I had this, mild ankle sprain back in February, so I'm really not in tip-top shape. I missed my final build. Like the guys like that show up on race, they're already talking about what they didn't do. It's about what you did do. Stop focusing on what you didn't do, or the swim that you skipped, or the long ride you didn't have. I missed my last big weekend of racing. Guess what? It's not going to matter. Hate to break it to you. It's not going to matter. If you missed one big weekend, it's not going to matter on your race day. In fact, it might have done you better, because you might be a little more fresh than you probably thought you would have been, and you're probably going to race a bit better. But those are the things that people harp on. It's about showing up and just being confident and confident's not the right word. Confident and content, I guess, with the work that you've done and how can I do the best with what I have on race day. That should be what you're competitive with.
Mm-hmm. Can we just talk about that a little bit more, that missing a big weekend? Or we were kind of talking about last time, but like just the confidence to realize that that's okay. And when you get to race day, I mean, you have to, again, like I've had my best 70.3 time was here. But the swim was short. And so I think technically my Muncie time would have probably been faster overall. I mean, like comparatively, I think I had a 5:05 there and I did a 4:15.89 or something here. So it was like 6 minutes, but I think the swim was certainly probably like 10 minutes more for sure. So, but the point is, when I got done with that race, I handled it so well. And it was the first time I ever felt like I controlled it and owned it throughout the day. And to me, that was a way better race, even though technically it may have ended up being slower if the swim would have been the line. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I knew that I had really improved in the sport. And I've been talking to a lot of my athletes lately about how you have to understand the race and how you have to understand how to pace and how to take it and like what means success in a course or a day. And there's a lot of those things that go down, man. It's like, I don't, like you always say, if you're going to compare, if you're going to look at anything, first I think people will always go to like try to beat their best time no matter what course it's against. And then they'll look at their age group. And then, like you always say, the best way to really, really compare, the best way to kind of be an honest comparison is against the field. If you're going to use anything, how'd you do against the field? Because your age group, who knows you showed up that day or whatever, and who knows you didn't show up the last time you were 10 slots faster or whatever, right, exactly. That kind of stuff. So it's just a smaller sample pool. So if you're going to compare, use the whole field and compare about, like, I just think it's a big deal. How you feel. Like that was my last 70.3 after I had done maybe like 10 of them in my life, and I felt way better throughout that whole race and at the end of it. And that was like 7 years gone by. And I remember posting something about age is a number, and I still believe that. How do you feel? How did you control the race? Judge it by that.
Listen, I've always been a fan of, if you're going to compare, again, don't compare your time. Always compare, like you said, against your overall number against the entire field, because the entire field is more than likely going to be close to where it was the last time, right? People are always going to be a little bit faster, but it's going to give you a more accurate number than, 2 years ago I placed 5th in my age group, and today I placed 7th. Well, if then you look back and think, oh, well, not a very lot of good competition showed up today, so I got 5th. Like, it's a number. Numbers are so much more meaningless than people give them like credit for. Or you could come in 10th, right, and have the best race of your life, right? It just happens so that the 9 fastest guys around all showed up too, and guess what? They all had perfect days. Because you could, listen, if you're in like the 30, 34 age group, 35, 39, 40, you could get like 13th in your age group and 20th overall, like against like 3,000 people. And to think that that's like somehow not good enough is ridiculous. So looking at how the total field did, in my opinion, is always a great kind of baseline for people to look at, because it's on average how everyone did that day. Male, female, experience, inexperience, front of the pack, middle of the pack, back of the pack. How did everybody seem to handle that day? Were there a lot of DNFs? Like, what was the median time for the day? Like, what happened? Like, because especially if it was like really, really bad conditions, how did that affect the total field? That's I always like to look at that as a coach. I'm like, okay, well, the winning time in this age group the last 2 years was, 4:30, 4:27, 4:34, whatever. And this year it was like, 4:41, and then you can't look at it is this year that much slower, because you have to look at other age groups, because some of them might be faster, right? It's just, that's why you can't put so much stock behind like overall places and making yourself understand that, did you really do your best? It's like, again, how did you feel about your race? And again, I've used this example many times, but I think it goes, it should be always revisited, is, the last full season I ever did, the race I was the happiest with, the most content with, the most pleased with my effort, was the one I had the worst placing in, was the Texas 70.3. The one that I was the most disappointed in my performance, I ended up on the podium. Like, to me, that's how it should be. And that's like, it's still something that it eats at me, because I don't feel like I really did my best that day, but it's not the placing to me that mattered. It was like, how did I feel when I got done? Did I really empty the tank? Did I really put it all out there? Who cares what place I was? Like, yeah, can you look at it for a minute and think, that's kind of discouraging, because there's that many people faster than me, but at the same time, like, could I have gone any faster? If the answer is no, then what do you have to be disappointed about? Like, you can't control other people and other people's lives. Like, that's just part of it. You can do better for yourself. You can execute better. You can put forth more effort. You can work even harder. But at the same time, it's like, you just have to understand, like, what do you put in your bucket of, did I do well enough? And I think that should be a very, very, very small bucket. A lot of people like to put all kinds of things in there. Did I beat so-and-so down the street? Was I the fastest person in my tri club? Did I beat my time from last year? Did I, do this? Did I raise my, our world athlete ranking? Like, they have this huge bucket of determining factors on how the race was successful. And what they do is they leave a lot of room for a lot of buts. Yeah, but this. Instead of being like, hey, did I execute today? Yep. Did I put forth my best effort? Yep. Done. Ball game. Like, that's it. And the race will be what it'll be. You can't control other people. And a lot of times you can't even control your result based on how the body was feeling, based on the temperature, and just based on how the day went itself.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
Did I lull you to sleep on that?
Well, I was at the end there. I was writing something down and I got a little distracted, but I heard what you're saying, and
it's
just okay. You feel different all day. You're like, it is. It's like sometimes my times, like, I don't know. And I think what gets into people's heads is that did I dig deep enough part? That's the hard one, right? Like, when did I go, was I going too easy on the bike, or did I not dig deep enough on that run? Those are always the questions. And I think for most of us, even though you just said, did I give it my best? And it's just hard to accept that as yes, even if you had a great race, because you could look at a great race and be like, man, if I, like you said, if I had done this on the bike, or I hadn't lollygagged in T2 or whatever, there's minute here, there's 30 seconds here, whatever. How can not over that course of a period of time, say even a half or a full, for sure a full, could you not be able to look back on that if you had a camera on you and you had your brain recording every thought, that you couldn't pick up like 4 minutes? You know what I mean? Of course you could, but like that's part of it. It's hard to do that. It's hard to perfect things. And I think that's what's it's just like in everyday life. I mean, you don't do everything perfect. Could you have done something better yesterday? Certainly in retrospect, but that's the thing, right? It's always retrospect.
Always. Like,
what are you going to do now to make this the right decision?
Like I love when, okay, so going back to what you said about, like your mind and what your thoughts are, it's like, I'm not saying you should want this, listened to publicly, but if you get done with the race, and you'd be totally fine if you're, like you said, like all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, every emotion were transcribed out through the day, would you be happy and excited and looking forward to listening to the whole entire recap? Right? Of just your emotions and your thoughts and your decision making, what you said, what you told, the positive self-talk, the negative self-talk. Would you want to listen to it at the end? Would you, or if you did, would you be happy with what you heard, or would you be disappointed or frustrated? If I look back at my best races, regardless of time, regardless of time, the best races in terms of like effort and execution, not overall placing, are ones where I feel like I would want to listen to the recap of what my thoughts and feelings were. They were races where I felt like I dealt with the emotion, I dealt with the negative self-talk, or this hurts, or you can listen. I've never done a race where I haven't thought for a split second, you know what, let's just call it a day. And it usually, for me, and as a strong swimmer, it usually happens on the swim, because I'm like, God, this sucks, and I got to do this all day long. Maybe I should just bag it. So I think about it every single race. And then the race that I've been the most disappointed with are the ones where like, I don't really want to listen to that, because I remember when I had this like negative self-talk, or had this thing, I was like, just take it easy, just coast, or you made bad decisions. Like that's how you should, I think, judge a lot of things. The same thing goes with life. And like the days, like, could you go back and replay? Did you make good decisions? Did you have good thoughts? Were you nice to people? Were you not nice to people? You talk about somebody's back and you're not talking about somebody's back. Like that's generally how we should measure success, right? Not measure success by money or, assets or whatever it is, or even number of friends. It should be about the quality of what's going on. And that's what you should look for in your racing, is the quality of your race. And what does that mean to you? Who cares what it means to somebody else? Like I had this conversation with an athlete Thursday or Friday last week, an athlete I've known for a very, very, very long time. 8 years, been working with her for 8 years on and off. And she called me up, and she just had her big birthday, just turned the big 5-0. Her son just got married, going through a bunch of life trends. She called me up, and she was like, she goes, I don't think I want to race anymore. And I said, okay, don't race anymore. She's like, but I'm just, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you, or I'm like, I don't care if you race or not. Like, that's a you thing, not a me thing. Well, and all my tri buddies trying to get me to keep going. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, you're an adult. Do what you want with your life. Like, and if you feel like you're wasting time, or you're too stressed out by doing an event that you paid for, which is the worst reason to ever do an event. Let me just say it right now. Just doing an event and just going through 12 to 15 hours a week of training to do something you really don't want to do, but you don't want to waste $400 is stupid. Okay? It's dumb. Because for most people, it's causing you stress and anxiety. And she was like, and I don't really want to do it. Her race was in October. And I'm having this conversation in July. And she's like, I just don't want to waste the money. I was like, listen, if training is causing you that much stress and you really don't like it, okay, then what if I walked up to you today and said, all right, hey, listen, if you give me $400, $450, I will create much less stress for you for at least 12 hours, 15 hours, not to mention your thoughts, of every week for the next 2 months. Would you pay it? For sure. I'd pay 4 times that, right? Like, if not more. So like, it comes down to what makes you the happiness, not what your buddies want you to do. Because they'll always want you to keep racing. They'll always want you to keep doing something with them because, we all love company. Sometimes, guess what? Misery loves company. do what makes you happy. Listen, if you don't want to race anymore, don't race anymore. I was like, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you race ever again, do what makes you happy. It's not about losing an athlete. It's about caring for a person. And that's what more of us should do, honestly, in this world, is like, do what makes you happy. Okay. And understanding that is growth to a whole new level, in my opinion, is recognizing that something that you've been doing really isn't making you happy. It's honestly making you more stressed or more anxious, and then choosing to do something different. It can be just running, can be still working out, but not having any structure. I've got a lot of athletes who frankly hate racing. They'd love to just train every single week of the year and never race, because racing it stresses them out. The pressure of the day stresses them out. They just like the structure in their life and performing well and being healthy and being fit. Do what makes you happy. And that when it comes to racing, when it comes to comparison or judging yourself, be kind to yourself. And if it makes you happy and you're happy with it, then who cares what anyone else thinks about it?
Mm. Well, okay. I like that. I was just thinking, if I did have a thought recorder on my race, I wonder how many times I would hear, just walk, dude, throughout the course of a marathon or something. And it would probably be a lot. And, I've just been thinking about, like, I've been talking to people about how to lock in a pace a lot lately, or just concentrate on locking in a pace and what that means, once you get into the meat section of your race, and like how most people, if they understand that and can do that, it would probably translate into a really solid race for them, and what that might mean. But I think the hard part is with that effort and like that just walk dude stuff is like, that can be the difference between, a 9:45 pace and a 9:30 pace, or 10, 15 seconds of pace can really destroy how long you can lock something in and how long a race might actually feel like you can handle it. It's just it's so testy. It's so touchy sometimes. But I agree with you. I mean, and to me, that was sort of just a microcosm, I guess, of like, do what feels good or do what makes you happy. And I think a lot of times when people get in races, they will like they'll have that best day run in their mind, and they'll be like, that's what I got to hold, and that's how I got to do it from the get-go or whatever. And I think that race becomes miserable. So I think races are a microcosm of training, and there is a way to be happy in race day, and there's a way to be super miserable. And a lot of times it's trying to do more than you can, or biting off more than you can chew, or trying to be somebody you're not.
Because, what you think about on race day is a lot what you think about in life. Do I really want to do this? Nah, I just don't want to work right now, so I'm not going to work. Do I really want to get up? Do I want to do something? I really want to work harder? Nah, they're not work harder. It's like you're always having to make, and then in Ironman and something, it's like, oh, I got to do this while I'm actually moving, right? And working hard and trying to do something like really, really that I've been working hard for the entire day. It's just, it is a triathlon, and especially long distance, all endurance events. That's why there's people gravitate to them again. It's because they're a great analogy, and they're very symbolic of life and like what we go through, just on a different level, doing a different thing. Wrap it up for today.
Wrapping it up.
As always, we love you. We don't know if we'll come to you on Wednesday or Thursday this week, or maybe even Friday. We'll see. We have a travel schedule going on this week. We're traveling up to Ohio. Hope to see you there. If you're traveling at all or racing this weekend at all, hope you have fun. Be safe. Give your best and leave the rest. If you want to, you can follow us on Instagram, C26 Triathlon. Website is also c26triathlon.com, is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Mike. He is at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me directly, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
Okay, that wraps it up.
All right, dude. Talk to you later.
See you.